So, my first task for the idea that I have is to go find some leaves, and I'm realizing very quickly that, again, day late, dollar short. A lot of the leaves are really, really dry and crispy and crunchy, but I did find some. So, of course, I brought home way, way, way more than I could ever possibly use. But anyway, so I am sticking some of them into this heavy art book. The art books that I have are the thickest, heaviest books that I tend to have. And whoopsie, let's just cover that up. Censorship. Anyway, so I saw in most of the projects that I saw where people were using real leaves, they were drying them in books, like flattening them out. And I thought that would make them easier to work with. So, of course, I crammed the 472 leaves that I gathered into this book and to dry because I like to have options. So here we are a couple days later after I finished the crochet sunflowers and decided to pull my leaves out and see where they're at. And they are really, really flat, which was delightful. I definitely didn't need this many. I do wish that I had thought of this sooner in the season, and maybe next year will be that year. But anyway, so here I am. I'm just trying to figure out what to do with these leaves. Some of them are already breaking apart a little bit. So I'm just laying out, trying to find the ones that I like the most, I guess, or the ones that go well together, and see what leaves will fit in this tiny little tray that I actually have to work with. And just trying to create some kind of a layout to see, what kind of a composition, if you would, that I could kind of create with this. So once I had several picked out and chosen, I ended up completely changing my mind and not at all doing the thing that I did right here, which I actually kind of like and wish I had done. But anyway, so I ended up just chucking them all because I needed to paint my tray anyway. So I'm using these Lumiere paints by Jacquard, I believe is how it's pronounced, and I'll put it in the description below. I honestly just found these in my bin in one of my drawers. I can't remember where I got these. I don't know how long I've had them, but I thought the sort of metallic finish would be nice for the decorative concept of this, and I liked the colors as well. They dried really, really fast, especially this one, this darker gray silvery one. I didn't think I was going to have enough to even cover the bottom of the tray, which was a real concern because, again, I don't know how long I've had these, so I didn't know if I'd have enough to do this whole thing. But I wanted to use the darker color because I thought it would kind of help the leaves to pop out a little bit versus if I had done one of the warmer colors. I didn't want them to sort of disappear into the background. But it is drying really, really fast, and it leaves kind of a powdery finish. Now, when it's completely dry, it's fine. It's smooth, just like any other acrylic paint. But yeah, I really like them. And after doing this, I think I want to maybe use them again in the future. So trying to decide which color I want to use for the general everything, and there's not enough of the gold. So we'll come back to that in a minute. So I ended up using this pinkish reddish color, and I'm doing that for the inside of the tray, the part that's not the darker part, and then the outside of the whole tray. And I do like the texture of the wood on these. It's not, obviously it's from the Dollar Tree. It's just a cheap plywood, but the paint goes on really smoothly. So that gives me hope for future potential maybe projects. So yeah, it goes on really smooth. I don't think I did 2 coats. I think I did in a couple of spots on this one do 2 coats, but it soaks in. It just went on really nice and even. That could be more the paint as well. I did notice on the edges that there are some rough spots. So if you're really particular about that, you could sand it down. I didn't have any sandpaper. I didn't. So here's me being impatient, trying to dry this tray, blowing my leaves all over the place, and then blowing the tray all over the place. So finally gave that up and let nature take its course and let it dry on its own. Sometimes we just have to wait that 10 minutes. It's torture, but we do what we have to do. So I'm just finishing up the inside of this with the same color I used on the outside. And my concern too was if I was going to get those little spots covered where I had touched with the darker paint and it did not cover it. So I did end up going over that a couple times. I hated the idea of wasting this gold paint because there was no way to get it back in the container. So I thought I would just do that on the edges. Now this paint in particular, it's really shimmery, so it kind of changes colors a little bit depending on where it is in the light. So I wasn't sure how much of a difference this was even making, but when you see it in person, you actually can see that little bit of an accent on it. So here I am fighting to open the Mod Podge in the safest way possible, and then trying to get that part off, which was totally unnecessary. Checking to see if there's a lid. There's not, and oh, we can just get rid of that. All right, so now back to it. I'm using the glossy Mod Podge, and I'm gonna try this the way that I do collage with paper. Now, I was not sure that this was going to work, and it kind of did, and it kind of didn't. As I say so often, this is how we learn, right? So it did get the leaves to stick. I actually kind of liked that it wasn't a glue, because after I did this, I thought maybe if I used a glue, like a super glue or something, it would definitely hold the leaves down more securely. But then you definitely also need a solid plan, and you will see as I'm going along with this that I end up kind of changing my mind about where I want things. So I do like that that I can kind of move the leaves around, tuck other leaves underneath, and it gives you that sort of working flexibility a little bit while you're creating the composition, because it's so fancy. But yeah, it wasn't like, because the leaves are, even though they're flattened out, you know, they still have a thickness to them. The stem obviously is not going to go completely flat. So kind of trying to think of a different solution for that. And at this point, I'm just glopping the Mod Podge on, trying to get these to hopefully stay where I want them to stay. It does dry clear, as you will see. But at this point, I'm already realizing this is probably not going to be the vision that I had envisioned for this project. I do think like maybe if I had found some newer leaves or some prettier leaves, it might have turned out a little bit better. But, you know, again, this is how we learn. It's just all about experimenting, figuring it out. Don't be afraid to make those mistakes. And, you know, you can always tear stuff apart and start over. And honestly, somebody else might like it. I don't know. Before you make any rash decisions, maybe someone else will thoroughly enjoy it and see a beauty in it that you as the artist sometimes don't see, because we get so into our heads about things that, you know, we have a certain vision or expectation. It's hard to step away from that. Anyway, here is the dried Mod Podge. And at this point, I just go crazy because I'm like, okay, we're going to try to add another layer with as much Mod Podge as possible, apparently, just to try to seal up some of those little spaces in there and get those to try to, you know, so that there's no air pockets, so that there's no breakage on the leaves and such. So then I set it aside and let this dry as well. So this is what I have going on right now with this, and you can see how well it's showing. You can see the little spaces kind of underneath the leaves. I mean, obviously it's three-dimensional stuff, but then also you can kind of feel like the little bubbles and bumps. So for the most part, I think it sealed it down pretty well. I don't love how these turned kind of gray, but anyway, I want to seal it up just a little bit more than with the Mod Podge. Just burp, burp. Just to kind of, because I'm concerned that some of these places where the leaves are really roughly edges and kind of dry, I don't want them to crack. So I'm going to actually go in with my triple thick glaze and see if that gives it a little dimension and sort of seals it up just a little bit more. Yeah, this is the action on this because the lid kept getting glued shut. So, art hack. So with this triple thick glaze, I've done video about it before where I use it on jewelry. I absolutely love it for jewelry because it gives sort of a three-dimensional effect, almost like a little bit of a raised effect. The main thing with this is not to overwork it too much if you use it, because it does, I don't want to say dry or sets very quickly, but if you overwork it, you will end up with brush strokes and things. So this really is a matter of just kind of glopping it on, and I kind of regret this step later, but we'll talk about that at the end. So while that's doing its thing, I'm going to play around with this second tray, and I painted it basically the same colors, but I used just the kind of the warmer color on the inside as well. And I'm trying to do sort of a stamping technique, if you will, with these leaves. So I tried the Lumiere paint first, and I felt like it was going on too thick. And then I tried a different paint, just sort of this acrylic craft paint. And then I decided to just mix them together because I liked the texture of the one, but I wanted the darker color as well. So I thought this would be a good combination and just going right on in there with it. So I wasn't sure how to make this work and I hated that one. So I just wipe that up and painted over it. And then we tried again. So I thought maybe focus more on the leaf shapes, which actually worked out pretty well because then I was just able to use that as almost like a stencil for the shape. And I went in with my paintbrush and the darker parts of the paint then to accent around all of those edges, fill in the missing spots and add the stems and just create kind of my own little painted leaf with that. So going in with some darker details to make the veins a little more apparent and going in trying to add a little bit of definition. I was a little bit hesitant on this. I used very little paint and just really kind of tried to keep it softer lines because I didn't want it to look cartoony. I felt like that wouldn't make sense with the way the print of the paint came out, if that makes sense. So I wanted to keep it a little bit softer and a little bit more painterly, I suppose is the right word. So, and this is kind of more my wheelhouse anyway. So I also was trying to be very careful not to overwork any of this, but staying with the two paints that I mixed at the moment, just for consistency, and touching up places that I didn't love, adding a little here, adding a little bit there. And then I went in with the gold paint just to add a few accents, just to add a little dimension, a little color, a little bit more of that autumn leaf feel to it with that Lumiere paint. And again, doing my best not to get carried away, but I do struggle with that sometimes. For me, in my brain, it tends to be like more is more kind of thing rather than less is more. So then once I had all of this done, I decided I wanted to go in and define the outline just a little bit. And I decided to use this brown Posca because I thought it would add an outline without making it too harsh. Like if I used a black Posca or even a white one would kind of make it look a little strange. So I thought the brown did really add a nice little bit of a definition and outline to it while still kind of blending in with the paint in the background, but also accenting and creating some nice lines inside the leaves to make them more leaf-like and more definitive. So then instead of using the Mod Podge, I went straight in with my triple thick glaze this time and covered the entire bottom and the inside just to sort of protect everything. I was a little worried at this point since I'd been so frustrated with the other one that it wouldn't turn out well, but it did fine. So I was trying to add a bow to this one, and I'm not sure if the bow is really necessary. Let's see. I don't know. Kind of cute. I don't know that there's like a good spot for it. So I think I'm going to skip the bow. But I wanted to summarize my thoughts in this whole making the autumn tray adventure. Yeah, I think we're good without the bow. So this one I'm actually pretty happy with. I think this one turned out cute. The only thing I don't like super love that I'm going to end up fixating on is I wish I had moved the leaves down just a little bit because I feel like there's all this empty space, but if I add something else, it's just going to feel clunky. I'm going to try to keep it minimalist. And also, you know, it's probably one of those things, like if you have a little tray like this one I think definitely usable. It's nice and flat, and you could just put some candies, you know, covered candies in there. With any of these things, if you're making a tray for something or anything that's a serving plate or situation, I would be really cautious. One, you don't want to get these kind of things too messy, these hand-painted things, because if you're just using Mod Podge is water-based. So, you know, washing it, you have to be really careful with. And two, food safety, right? Like you don't necessarily want like naked food touching any of these surfaces. But this one I actually really like. I like how the leaves just gave me a cute texture, a nice little texture and an outline. So this one I'm happy with. I'm happy with the colors all the way around. This little friend over here, I'm not super thrilled about this one, but let's discuss because I think the idea was kind of a good idea, but a few things I realized as I was doing the whole process. One, I think next year I might try something like this again, but maybe get out there when the leaves are still a little more fresh, because all of these leaves were so dried out already. They're super spotty, which I kind of really didn't hate. I thought that's just nature. But two, I used way too much Mod Podge. I don't know if you can even really, if it's going to show, but I can feel where the Mod Podge, because again, it's water-based, I could feel where it started warping this really thin wood a little bit. So I think there was just too much stuff on there. And by the time I put the triple thick glaze, you can see where it's like pooled up and stuff. So it just looks really sloppy and messy. And I think it just made the leaves look worse instead of making them, you know, look finished or look like a finished piece. So I would say if you're doing something like this, it could be nice as like just a decorative sort of object somewhere. Not necessarily even like for a candy dish or something like that, because I feel like you would pull on the leaves a lot. So I would say the Mod Podge would probably be fine, but just use it as like a decorative thing, you know, something you could just kind of stand up somewhere and be like, hey, look, here's a decorative little tray. But I really kind of, I'm thinking I might even pull all of these up. So I don't know how that'll work out, because it's in there pretty solid with the, like, can I pull it up? Where did my scissors go? Because I really don't like it. I don't know. I'll come back to that later. I might see if I can rip it up out of there and just use the tray for something else. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I like this one. I think this one was a success. Again, I think newer leaves, or even if I had found like some plastic leaves, not plastic, I guess they're not plastic. Like I have these little cloth leaves. This came off of a wreath that I bought from someone years and years ago. And this part just finally fell off. So I just have it as decorative. But like these kind of little fabric-y leaves, I think that might lend itself even a little bit better. And maybe even flatten out more, because you don't have, you know, the actual nature. It's just flat. So that's something to think about. Let me know, you guys, if you try something like this, and what your results are. But I think this one I'll keep. This one I'm probably going to demolish and do something different with the tray. But yeah, let me know if you enjoyed this. I will see you guys soon. We'll do some little winter crafts. I have no idea what I'll be doing next week. We'll see where inspiration takes me. I hope you guys all go and be creative this week. I will see you soon. Bye.